I'm just so thrilled and grateful to have Annette with us here today. I've known Annette for a few years. I met Annette it was at we were both at a retreat, and I was speaking about forgiveness, and I was speaking about it from, the practice of meditation and mindfulness related to forgiveness. And that's when I met Annette. And I realized that she has such a depth of experience and heart and soul and has turned this into her life's work. And so I'm just so deeply honored that she's with us to share her beautiful wisdom, her soul, her heart, her journey. She's real, she's honest. And that's her personally. Now, professionally, Annette is an international speaker. She's an award-winning author. She's a freedom facilitator and a coach with a rich background in nursing and decades of experience as a healthcare executive. Her deep faith and positive attitude have sustained her through trauma, trials, and tragedies. She has spoken to thousands in a vast array of audience across Canada, the US, and Africa. And Annette empowers individuals to forgive themselves and others through amazing stories and strategies that are sure to inspire, encourage, and uplift. And her award-winning book, Forgiveness, The Mystery and Miracle, with a healing process threaded throughout, has resulted in transforming hearts and lives globally. And as soon as I met Annette years ago, I got her book. And as I was preparing to chat with her today, of course, I went through the book again. And at the very beginning, she had left a message for me, as a message for really all of us, which was forgive, let go, and live free. And I'm like, wow, like if that's just not a mantra, that is inspiring. So I'm going to open our discussion first by just saying that, of course, forgiveness is a universal process because we are human beings. And as human beings, we are going to experience in our lives times of anger, resentment, disappointment, hurt, loss, some big traumas, some little traumas. And I'm going to ask people to mute. Can I mute? How can I'm going to mute.
Yeah, it looks like they're muted.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you. Can people still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay.
I'm not sure if am I muted?
Nope, I can still hear you. That's great.
Good.
So I'm going to open our discussion. I'm just going to read a very brief quote from Annette's book, or one in from her own words, and then I'm going to turn it over to Annette. So this book is about forgiveness and my quest for healing. As we journey together through this book, I will try to unravel much of the mystery surrounding forgiveness. As you begin the journey towards your own healing, I invite you to feel with me the grief I experienced in the aftermath of a terrible tragedy. I invite you to open your mind, your heart, and your life to the healing that can bring wonderful peace when you allow yourself to fully reflect, to see, touch, taste, and feel your own experience, and to release the stranglehold grief, anger, and even fear may have on your heart. And that was just so deeply moving. And so with that, I'm going to invite Annette to share with us. Tell us about your journey and why forgiveness has become a big part of your life's work and the gift that you're leaving to all of us.
Wow, thank you for that introduction, Bev. It just touches my heart. And then the fact that you chose a passage from my book, I haven't read that passage for a long time. But, you know, the foundation, the reason I wrote the book was because of the life-changing experience I had. You see, one of my brothers was tragically murdered in the United States in 1999. And I'm ordinarily not an angry woman, but I was angry after my brother's death because we didn't know for a year and a half who had done it or why. And in trying to determine, one night in my bed, I was trying to figure out what kind of person could have taken my brother's life. And I was listing all kinds of things. They must have been angry, bitter, callous, dangerous, deceit, evil, and the list went on. But then right there in my bed, I heard a voice. And I don't know what the faith background is of those of you that are online today, but I heard a voice, and I've come to recognize that as a divine voice, the voice of God.
Mm.
And he said, Annette, your brother's murderer is deeply wounded. I love your
Mm.
brother's murderer as much as I love you and as much as I love your brother. Wow, I didn't want to hear that. And I wrestled with it and wrestled with it. My husband was laying beside me. He was sound asleep, didn't hear anything. Finally, I accepted it and I fell asleep in peace. Next morning at breakfast, I told my husband what I'd experienced, and he hadn't heard anything. And at the end of telling him what I'd experienced, I said, I hope the day will come when I can tell my brother's murderer how much he's loved by God. And there must be people in prison that need to hear that as well. Never, ever dreaming where that would go. Year and a half later,
Mm.
we learned that there were 5 people involved in my brother's death. And I was invited to the person that pulled the trigger in my brother was a long distance trucker, and he was found dead, shot to death in his truck, his big truck. And I was invited to attend the hearing, the sentencing hearing, because Travis, the one who had pulled the trigger in my brother's death, was being sentenced because he confessed he didn't have to stand trial. Would I like to present a victim impact statement? Well, I didn't know what an impact statement was, but I researched it and I said, you bet, I'll be there and I'll present one. I worked for weeks on my statement, crafting what the impact to me was, to me and to my family as a result of my brother Soren's death. The day of that sentencing hearing came, and there were 10 of us presenting victim impact statements. I was the last to speak. And when I went to the witness stand, I shared my victim impact statement that was very well crafted. But at the end, you see, I'm going to back up just a minute. During the time, from the time that the incident happened until we came to Virginia, I was processing all of this. And when we finally learned that 5 people were involved in my brother's death, I said to my husband, I need to get out on my motorcycle. I had done a lot of processing on my motorcycle. And
Mm.
while we were riding, I was praying, why is Soren part of this picture? Why? Why did they kill Soren? And then right there on my motorcycle, I heard that voice again. And he said, forgive them. They didn't know what they were doing. There was an answer. Why? They didn't know my brother, who he was, how much he was loved, how much he was needed, how he contributed in his community. So I had an answer there. But then that other part, forgive them. No, no. And I cranked open the throttle of my motorcycle and raced down the highway. We were in a group of 12 bikers that day. Again, I heard the voice, forgive as I have forgiven you. Forgive and I will forgive you. I wrestled with it, above my wildly beating heart and the loud pipes of my big, beautiful motorcycle. But then I said, okay, God, if that's what you want me to do, then you're going to have to make me willing and make it possible. Well, now we go back to the courtroom. Just before we got up to present our victim impact statements, a social worker and psychologist got up and talked about Travis, the one who'd pulled the trigger. He'd been physically and emotionally abused. He and his brothers had been abandoned. They'd been left in poverty and shame. And they'd also been taught how to steal big trucks or the payload on trucks. Right there on the witness stand, it was like neon signs blinking, deeply wounded, deeply wounded, deeply wounded. Well, I presented my victim impact statement. It was very, very well crafted. But at the end, I looked at Travis and I said, Travis, there's another impact that I have to share with you. And that is that I believe that God will never love what you did to my brother, but he loves you in spite of what you've done. And because of that, I'm offering you God's love and forgiveness and my own forgiveness. Do you know? Immediately, I was a transformed woman. I
Wow.
wasn't saying that it was okay what he did. No, forgiveness doesn't excuse or erase the harm that is done because wrong will always be wrong. Harm will always be harm. 5 people went away to serve the rest of their lives in prison. I came away a free woman. And that gave me a passion when I felt that what a transformation, life-changing experience it was for me. It developed a passion to help other people forgive and let go. You see, I was naming the pain, but then I made a choice that I wanted to heal. In fact, I made 3 very, very important choices. The first choice was I wanted to be happy again. And when we're embroiled in something that's really painful, it's so easy to think I will never be happy again. I knew that I could be happy, although I would never be happy that my brother was gone. My second choice was that I didn't want to be consumed. And for those of you that are watching this broadcast, it's so easy when we're embroiled in a painful situation, we can just be so consumed that it just constricts us. My third choice was that I wanted to grow. Well, I never dreamed where those choices would lead me. As I said before, the passion that I developed to help other people forgive and let go. I ended up writing a book that Bev has shown you on the screen, Forgiveness, the Mystery and Miracle. And the reason that I called it that title is because we don't understand forgiveness. We misunderstand it. People think that if I forgive, I'm condoning what they've done, or I'm going to let them, I can be hurt again. That's the mystery. It's when we make a choice to heal and we make a choice to release our grip on the anger, the bitterness, the resentment, or even the fear and dread. When we make a choice to release our grip on those negative emotions and the stories, because we can't change. What's past is past. We can't change it. So it's important to let it go. As Bev said, I've spoken all across Canada and the US and in Africa. And people are they're finding freedom and peace when they learn to forgive themselves and to forgive others and to let go of those things, those chains, those handcuffs, those painful past experiences. And none of us are immune to being hurt, and none of us are immune to hurting others. But if we make a choice to release our grip on those painful stories, those painful experiences, we can heal. And so my book, Forgiveness, the Mystery and Miracle, has, it's thousands and thousands of copies of that book. And I'm grateful. I'm the things that have happened as a result. I mean, the stories, so many unexpected stories. I'll never forget Marlene. Marlene, after hearing me speak and reading my book, contacted me. She said, my granddaughter was sexually abused by my son. When she opened up that story, we all hated her because it just destroyed our family. My son went to prison. And she said, after I read your book and heard you speak, I walked back into my granddaughter's life and I forgave her. And she then, in turn, forgave her mother for not rescuing her. And our family now has healed as a result of forgiveness and letting go.
Mm.
I think of June. June read my book. She lived in BC, wrote me a note and said, I've been in pain for 17 years after an automobile accident, and I've been an angry woman. I was angry with the doctors that they couldn't fix me. I was angry with God that he didn't heal me. I was angry. I was an angry woman, and I've been in pain for 14 years. After I read your book, I realized I had to forgive so many people. I had to forgive God, had to forgive the doctors, had to forgive myself that I was such a pitiful, angry mess. And after I did all the forgiveness that I could, I today am pain-free.
Mm.
Oh, unexpected stories that come from people making a positive choice that they want to heal.
Mm.
A lot of people don't understand that they have choices. They get stuck in anger and fear and all of the emotions that are part of anger and fear. But when we,
Annette, I want to ask you this question
yes,
with a theme I hear you saying, and a powerful, of all the many, many, many powerful points is sharing what you shared about that distinction between making the choice
mm,
to transform our own hurt, our own pain, our own suffering, our own resentment, our own experience that we also know erodes our peace of mind. It affects our health. It affects, I mean, all that. But what you so powerfully shared was how that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences, or like I find that such a powerful like reminder for me when I get stuck in tangling up my desire to release my feelings around this, the anger, the resentment I carry, from then thinking, okay, well, that means I need to maintain, say, this relationship in the same way with this person, or, it gets tangled. So I always think back to your story and your journey, and you're addressing one of those misconceptions, and how as you forgave and you said you released yourself in that, you're in the courtroom where justice will be determining
yes.
that there's consequences. So what would you what would is that inaccurate? Is that like reflect kind of one of the misconceptions?
Yeah, people, and there definitely are consequences. And wrong will always be wrong. It was wrong what they did to my brother. Uh, some people will say, I will never forgive, I will never heal until that person has either been executed or is dead, or and then when that actually happens, they realize that didn't make me heal. So it is about choices, Bev. It is about choices. And and forgiveness is a choice. It's a choice to help ourselves heal and find peace and freedom despite the hurtful things that have happened. And that
Mm,
peace is so amazing. I mean, I will forever regret that my brother is gone. I'll forever be sad at how he died, but I can talk
mm,
about it without being angry. It is what it is. And I've been
mm,
able to put that in the past. Of course, there are still so many times that tears will come to my eyes or when I have a memory or but it's not when I talk about it, it's not with anger and hostility. No, it's it's the facts and this is what happened. But this I'm so grateful that that his death was not in vain, that there are so many people that are being helped because of the principle of forgiveness and letting go. You know,
mm,
we never my husband and I, after, when I talked to my husband that next morning after I'd heard that in the night, never dreamed that one day we would be working in the prison setting, working with men and women who are serving life sentences and other violent crimes. We created a seminar called IOU, Inward, Outward, and Upward. And do you know, it's a 2-day seminar. 80 to 90% of the more than 250 people we've worked with have are deeply wounded. They've been abandoned, abused, neglected. They've seen violence and suicide. Many of them have never been able to tell their own story. Now, their stories don't give rationale. Their pain and the trauma that they've been through doesn't give rationale for what they've done. And never, 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 I want to make that quite clear. Never do we diminish the harm that's done, and never
mm,
do we, yeah, but we don't judge or criticize. When they feel they can trust us, they share those stories. And when they can share those stories, that helps them to heal the past.
mm,
And then we can talk about the impact of their crime, and we can also help them understand forgiveness, forgiving
mm,
others and forgiving themselves. They still will continue to serve, uh, the sentence that's been handed down to them because of, justice needs to be served, but we never get entangled in saying, oh, they shouldn't be in prison now. No, that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to inspire, encourage, and uplift so they can heal. And it's amazing how they share their regret, remorse, and shame with us. It's amazing.
mm. And that
I
you
just,
mentioned about
yeah, go ahead.
you, you mentioned about a couple times about self-forgiveness.
Yes.
Can you share a bit more about self-forgiveness? And is it a similar process or
Well, it's interesting that you ask that because, a lot of times people say to me, the hardest person to forgive is myself. And so
mm,
I've developed a formula. It's called the Idea Cafe. If you write the word idea and cafe down the left side of the page, it's the Idea Cafe. It's like a menu. The I stands for identify why you need to forgive yourself. The D is describe your feelings and the suffering that you are experiencing. The E is embrace the impact of your actions. And that means acknowledge how you've hurt that someone else or a group of people. And then the A in idea is acknowledge what you've learned. You know, when we go through tough experiences, it's really important to look back. What have I learned? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about others? The cafe, CAFE, that next word, the C stands for have compassion for yourself and for others that have been hurt. The A in cafe stands for apologize. It's not easy to apologize. We have to be real, deep, and meaningful when we apologize. The F in cafe says forgive and let go of the past. That's part of that formula. And then the E in Idea Cafe is to empower your freedom, to allow yourself to feel free when you've been able to forgive yourself. You know, we did a seminar. We do a lot of work for women in recovery from addiction, incarceration, and sexual exploitation. We spend a full day, usually every month, with a group at this addiction recovery center. And we did a 2-day seminar for the women and their families. It's been a few years ago now. And at the end, it was just a phenomenal seminar. And at the end, the families and their loved one were finally coming together, and they had apologized to each other and had been, they'd been through a process throughout those 2 days. But they'd apologized to each other. And then they came back. They were hugging each other and holding on to each other. Such a stark contrast from the first day of the seminar, where they were with their arms and they weren't even sitting together.
Mm-hmm.
One of the attendees wrote a note to us a few days later. And she said, in that seminar, I was able to release the shame that had been overarching. That's not the word. I was able to confining shame that had held onto me for so long. The executive director of that addiction recovery place said, hope, healing, and forgiveness was happening everywhere. And that was as a result of forgiveness, forgiving each other, forgiving themselves.